Okay, so today I want to talk about entry strategies. Basically meaning why and how do companies go to countries that are not their own. And so when we talk about foreign market entry, we want to ask three questions. We want to ask, where are we going to enter? Which country are we going to enter? When are we going to do that? And when is not so much about the time. It's not a chronological time. But the when is very much about, do we want to be first entrants or do we want to be late entrants? Do we want to go into a new market after other companies already have invested in market education? Or do we want to be the first one to create monopoly positions? And how basically talks about the different types of investment we can use to enter new markets or new countries. And so the three questions that we're going to look at, the where, when, and how, are very much influenced by two aspects that we talked about during the semester. One aspect is, of course, the institution. Okay, when we talk about India, what does it mean entering the Indian market? You work for a company that is very active in the Indian market. Oh, India. You just today handed in an assignment about India, you remember? Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. So when we talk about institutions, we talk about rules, regulations. Okay. Does the country that you want to enter, does the country allow you, for instance, to make an investment by yourself? Many countries will demand that if you want to make an investment in their country, you have to do it as a joint venture. So you have to work with a local partner because, for instance, they want knowledge to stay in the country. There are industries where even if you want to make an investment, you will not be allowed to make an investment. For instance, a big Chinese company named Huawei. I don't know if you ever heard of Huawei, but maybe you have their phone. Yeah, it's a phone among others. They make phones, but what they also do, they make a lot of infrastructure for data. And basically, they're one of the biggest competitors of the American company that creates servers called Cisco. Thank you very much. So they are big competitors of Cisco. And basically, when they wanted to enter the American market, the United States got very, very uptight. Why did the United States become very uptight? Because suddenly they understood that there will be a Chinese company that will own the servers through which the data flow, including all kinds of sensitive data. And in China, most big companies have very tight connections with government. Actually, in Huawei, one of the top floors is occupied by government. And so at the end of the day, what happened is that Huawei wanted to make an investment in the United States, and the United States did not allow it. They did not allow Huawei to buy a local American company because they were afraid that in a few years, the Chinese government will have too much access to sensitive American data, okay, just because of the servers. So when we talk about institution-based view, we basically talk about these kind of issues. So it's not only economic issues, it's also political issues, it can maybe social or ecological issues that are addressed through the institution-based view, and then we can decide which country we want to enter or which country we can enter because of different institutional decisions. And then there is, of course, a research-based view, which also influences very much the decision which country to go to and how to go, and that is already based on what the company, the individual company, brings into the business. Okay, so here it's really about, are you able as a company to create value for customers in the target country? How rare is what you create? Is it easy or difficult to imitate? And how are you organized? So basically, when we talk about choice of foreign countries, choice of where to go for different reasons, we take, as management, we take into account both the institutional views, but we also take into account what do we bring to the table, what do we bring to that specific country that is valuable, rare, difficult to imitate, and well organized. So we have to understand, on one hand, we have to understand comparative advantages of the different countries. We have to understand the institutions of the different countries. And we have to understand the industry. For instance, Porter's 5 forces we can use to understand the industry. And we have to understand the firm's sustainable competitive advantages and its slack resources. One of the things that when we decide to go to a new country, one of the things that we really need is managerial resources. It takes a lot of managerial attention to go to another country. And so the question is, when we talk about slack resources, or slack resources is another word for enough resources or more than enough resources, one of the resources we really need is managerial attention, or management time. If we don't have that, it's very difficult to succeed in a foreign country. We have to look if we can overcome liability of foreigners. We talked about liability of foreigners, you remember? Yes, good. So if you remember, what does it mean?
It means paying for a taxi in a different country.
I'm happy. You know what was interesting?
Oh, you asked her?
Yes.
Sorry. Go ahead.
You know, it's like a puppeteer.
What does it mean?
Okay, what she said. Okay, so liability of foreigners basically means that we have a disadvantage being foreigners, and we talked about that. We talked about all kinds of different examples. However, we talked about the example I gave you is that when you take a taxi in a foreign country and so on, but of course that is true for businesses as well.
I didn't get the taxi part.
You didn't get a taxi part. Okay, so when you go to a foreign country, you arrive in the middle of the night and you take a taxi to your hotel. In many cases, the taxi driver will charge you double or take you, you know, some extra mileage or whatever. Why? Because you're a foreigner. You don't know where you're going. You don't know the way exactly. You don't know exactly how much you're going to pay. And so that is liability of foreigners. Because we are foreigners, we make mistakes. We don't know many things, and we have to pay for that. Okay, if you're a foreigner, then you don't know about special taxes, or you don't know about special discounts, or you don't know the best way to go somewhere, or whatever. Okay, and the same goes for businesses. When we come to do business in a foreign country, usually we don't know exactly how things work. And even if we do know how things work, we researched it and we learned how things work, we still don't have the local network. Okay, here in Israel, many times when you're not able to get something organized, what do? You call a friend. And that friend calls another friend, and then somehow someone knows someone, and you call that person up. It's called network. And you call that person up and you say, look, I really have this problem. Can you make sure that someone is going to deal with my problem? Okay, that's how things work all over the world. We use our personal connections, we use our networks, our informal networks, to get things done. Okay, and that is true also to get things done. It's also true, for instance, if we need help with anything, it's also true, but it's also true for being nominated for something or getting a job or whatever. If you have a good network and you tell your friends, I'm looking for a job, then one of your friends will probably tell you to get in contact with this and that person for an interview. Okay? And that is what a good network is all about. That is also why we always encourage you to use your studies to create a big network, because the people that you meet here at campus are going to be people that are going to work with you in all kinds of different capacities throughout your working life. It may very well be that in 3 years, when you go to the Ministry of Interior or whatever, you'll meet someone there who was a student here at the College of Management. And if you know each other, that may help you to get things done quicker or to get more attention from someone, so on and so forth. When we are in a strange country, when we are outside our home country, basically we don't have that informal network. We just don't have it. It doesn't exist. And so that is also part of liability of foreignness. If we don't have a network, if we don't know the culture, if we don't know the language, that is liability of foreignness. We don't really understand how to behave in that host country. And that costs money. And so the question always is, as a business, the question always is, can we afford to do business in a country where we have to pay more because we're foreigners? And so that is really liability of foreigners. That's what it's about. When we're tourists in a foreign country, we know that it's going to cost us money, and we know we're going to make mistakes, and we calculate it into our budgets usually. But when we're businesses, we have to do exactly the same. We have to actually ask ourselves, can we make enough money in that target country to cover the mistakes that we're going to make as foreigners? So that is about liability of foreigners. On the other hand, okay, so what we said is that a company needs a strong competitive advantage to succeed in a foreign country. Okay, I'm not going to go back. You remember that we talked about a RIO, or resource-based view, right? We talked about it, you remember? It's about having resources and capabilities that are valuable, rare, difficult to imitate, and difficult to substitute. And we also talked about that on a personal level, also at the organizational level. And so on one hand, there is the Uppsala model, which was developed by Johnson and Valne from Uppsala University. And they basically, and a very similar model was developed by Loostelninen, and he called it the POM model, but basically they all talk about the same. So different models were developed in different Scandinavian countries, but basically they all observed the same behavior by those Scandinavian companies. And what they saw, all those researchers, they basically saw that Scandinavian countries, companies, when they internationalize incrementally, step by step. And how do they do that? Okay, they looked at companies such as IKEA, ABB, Volvo.
Yes, red logo, right?
Mm-hmm. So service, financial services. H&M. So all these companies internationalized incrementally. What does that mean? That they started in their home country, and once they were big enough in their home country, they went across border, but they stayed in the Scandinavian group of countries. And at first they just exported. So first they sent just containers with products to the other country. And then they had third parties representing them. And after they were able to build a certain volume of sales, they started to create more assets in the host country. So they would establish maybe a shop, and only after that they would also move maybe part of their production to other countries. But basically what the Uppsala model says is that companies, in order to internationalize, need to go through a learning process. And to go through the learning process, you go step by step. So you make a small step, and if that works, you make another small step, and if that works, you then you start to commit. So it's a slow and long process, and also geographically, the process is concentric, meaning that it's around the focal point or around the home country. And every time they take one step further regarding also regionality. So from being a local company, they become a regional company, and then they become a European company, and only after that they go overseas to more faraway markets or more exotic markets, or however you want to.
So local, region, global.
Yeah, local.
European, global.
Yeah. Local, regional, international, global. Of course, one of the things that happened in the 90s, so 20 years ago more or less, people like me started paying attention that, for instance, Israeli companies do not behave according to the Uppsala model. So the Uppsala model is not relevant for Israeli companies. One of the reasons is that Israel doesn't have neighbors, or at least neighbors that they can do business with. And so the Uppsala model, basically you can argue the Uppsala model doesn't work for Israeli companies. Israeli companies go overseas right away. They never trade really with their next door neighbors like this, the Norwegians and the Swedes and the Danes do, and the Finns. On the other hand, you can also say that the Uppsala model also works for high-tech companies from Israel, because while we don't go to our direct neighbors, we go mostly to the United States and to Europe, which are basically, and Europe we talk mostly about Germany, Western Europe, which are countries that are closer to us in terms of culture, in terms of how to do business. We have trade agreements with the United States and with European Union, so that allows us to do trade easily. And usually when you look at the Israeli companies that internationalize, the high-tech companies that internationalize, they will only go to Asia or to South America or to Africa after they have established their experience in Europe and in the United States. So you can say it also happens, the Uppsala model is true even for countries like Israel or Australia, because if you look at those countries, it is still incremental internationalization, although this is changing because more and more young companies are basically investing upfront in foreign countries, and they're breaking up their value-added chain. But anyway, that's the Uppsala model that talks about stepwise incremental internationalization, which makes a lot of sense in many cases. There is the issue of liability versus asset of foreignness. While we usually consider the downside of going to another country, there is also an upside. For instance, if you think about Israel and how Israel brands itself, Israel is branded as startup nation. Israel is branded as the capital of cybersecurity. Israel is branded as one of the biggest hubs for security overall. And so, for instance, if you're in security, if you're in a security business, saying that you're from Israel may not only be not a liability, but it actually can be an asset, because you leverage Israel's branding as a security country, and you use that to create market share in foreign countries. Okay, so it's not only about liability of foreignness, it can also be about assets of foreignness. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, that I recently saw a TV show. It wasn't a show, it was a
Program?
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
About that security issue and business and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Security is going to be, or already is, a very, very, important issue, especially cybersecurity. Most companies in the world are not really secure in terms of cyber, and can be very easily broken into in terms of cyber. And we're not necessarily talking about banks. Think, electricity companies around the world, gas companies or in general companies that do that are responsible, for instance, for transportation, so on and so forth. Okay, just think what terrorists can do, breaking into such companies and using their data or changing their data. So yes, security is a very, very big issue. And not only security of people, but also security of data and security of organizations and systems and so on. Okay. So we talked about assets of foreignness. So being an American company can be an asset. Being a Japanese company can be an asset. Okay. And sorry? Yeah. Korean, and being Korean, it can be an asset, depending on which industry we talk about. So the first question that we ask ourselves when we want to internationalize is usually where to enter. And the question where to enter depends very much upon what we need or what we want to accomplish. So if we're looking for natural resources, then probably we'll go to countries that have those natural resources. Okay, and so for instance, if you look at what China is doing in Africa, which is incredible, China is basically buying up Africa. Okay, Chinese companies are basically buying up Africa, and why is that?
They have natural resources, they have mines and
Yeah, they have natural resources such as?
mines of steel and
Yeah, okay, steel I think is not a natural product.
Diamonds.
They have diamonds, okay, what else do you have in Africa?
Coal?
Sorry? Coal?
Yeah.
Coal, right. Coal, okay, what else? Coal, you know, the black stuff that creates energy, gas.
No, what's the question?
What do they have in Africa?
natural resources they have.
What natural resources do you have in Africa?
There is a certain fish that one ate in South Africa that is very high quality over there. And
Fish.
Yeah, they have a big industry about that.
Okay, so fish, energy, not only coal, but all kinds of energy, definitely. Nigeria, diamonds. Okay, diamonds, yeah. I'm not sure that China is investing in Africa because of the diamonds. I think they're looking for other stuff besides diamonds. So we said energy, very important. Different types of metals, as Jan said. Okay, not necessarily steel, but they're looking for different types of metals, especially, you know, what for? For the creation of smartphones. There are all kinds of precious metals in smartphones that can be found in African countries. And so what is happening, interestingly, is because China is today the manufacturing hub of the world of, for instance, smartphones and tablets and computers and so on and so forth, they are basically investing in Africa to be able to source their basic resources from Africa and to own them. And one day, probably China will be the owner of Africa. Okay, so that is one reason why to go international. The other reason may be market seeking. So we're looking for a market that is willing and interested in buying our products. What do you see here? Watermelon, right. This is a watermelon, and the lady that is holding the watermelon, do you know which country she's from? Japanese, exactly. Okay, so by the way, how do you create a watermelon in the form of a heart? Anyone? How do you create a watermelon in the form of a heart? You have to put it in a box when it's small, and then it grows in the shape you want it to grow in. Okay, so watermelons, actually they are also grown in Israel. Watermelons are special shapes.
That's the season right now.
There is a market in Japan that is willing to pay quite a high premium for funny shaped watermelons and funny shaped fruit in general. Okay, so The second reason to internationalize is to find markets that are interested in your product and are willing to pay for the product that you know how to manufacture or create, sorry. Then we have efficiency seeking. That's a third reason to internationalize. Efficiency seeking basically means what? What do we see here?
Throwing less. Reduce cost.
Yeah, it's to reduce cost. What are we looking at here?
Textile,
Right, textile industry, probably in Bangladesh or something like that, or Bhopal, or I don't know where. We see women, Asian women, working in the textile business that is then re-exported to probably to the West. So efficiency seeking is the third reason to go international. It's basically to be able to use cheaper resources than exist in our own country. And the last reason to internationalize is, what do we see here? What is this? It's a map of Greater Tel Aviv area, exactly. It's a map of Greater Tel Aviv area, and there is actually an application that will show you all the startups in the Greater Tel Aviv area and where they are located exactly. Okay, this is a screenshot of that application. It shows you where all R&D centers are. It shows you where incubators are, and so on and so forth. Okay, so when we look for innovation, that is also a reason to go international. Which company is now establishing an R&D center in Israel? Was in the news last week or two, a week or two ago.
That did what?
International company investing in Israel for R&D purposes. No? No one?
No clue.
R&D, research and development. In Hebrew, Machkar Pituach. Okay, so Israel is a hub. It's considered a hub in the world for those that are looking for innovation, that are looking to access innovative resources and capabilities. And so Israel is one of those countries. And there aren't very many in the world. Israel is one of the few that is considered an innovation hub. Other places that are considered innovation hubs are, of course, Silicon Valley in the United States, the Boston area in the United States.
What was the company that you say?
Sorry?
What was the company?
The company that recently invested in Israel, an automotive company, car company, which is very interesting because basically we don't have a car industry in Israel. And what we're seeing now is that automotive companies are investing in Israel, among others, because of companies such as Mobileye. Okay, but not only Mobileye, there are all kinds of startups in Israel that are related to the automotive industry. And we actually create in Israel all kinds of parts that go into the automotive industry, even if we don't have our own. I mean, the last time Israel tried the automotive industry was when they created Susitas. And that was a very long time ago. And then we decided as a country that we don't really have a competitive edge in the automotive industry. But we have always manufactured and always created knowledge for the automotive industry. And so now we see that they're really investing in Israel also because of autonomous driving, which Israel is also leading. I don't know if they were leading it, but we are strong in autonomous driving. We have, as said, Mobileye and other companies that create a lot of interest in the automotive industry. And by the way, what is also related to that, for instance, is smart cities. If you have smart cities, then you also need smart driving. What are smart cities? Sorry? What are smart
Is it a smart city in
Wi-Fi in the
Lviv?
city.
The smartest
That it's
city in the
all
world is
under one thing, there's cameras everywhere, you can know what's happening. There's one city in Israel that's like that right now.
Okay. And what does it involve, a smart city?
Everything's computerized.
Everything is computerized, for instance, yes.
Everything's, like, the whole city has cameras everywhere. You
The whole
can
city has
see
cameras everywhere.
all the time.
Okay,
Which is completely wrong, but that's my own opinion.
okay.
You've got
Com-
Wi-Fi on the street.
Sorry?
Wi-Fi on the
Yeah.
street.
Wi-Fi on the streets. You get all your, all the cables are under
Under
the ground. It means all houses are hooked up to a whole infrastructure. So you get smart houses as well. It also means that you can, for instance, regulate traffic. Because if you see that traffic in certain roads is building up, then you can redirect traffic. Okay, that's also being part of a smart city. So smart cities can be regulated, they can be managed much better. It allows us as citizens to enjoy not only better flow of traffic, but it also allows us, as you say, Wi-Fi on the streets. It gives us instant information, it gives us a lot of security. Okay, if you have cameras everywhere, everyone knows there are cameras everywhere, it really affects crime. So you can feel very safe on the street.
No. Stalking. Everyone can know where I am at every single second.
Okay.
Yes, it's good for parents, with children, but anything you make today can work for good and bad. Problem is,
Right.
people usually use it for bad too.
that's
Same
how
with the
technology
internet.
works.
Right. That is always true. That is always true. But it also gives you a feeling of safety because everything is on camera, you'll have less crime.
Yeah.
People are less tempted. Crime is very much about temptation. So if you're less tempted, then you have less crime. Women most likely feel more safe
Yeah.
in the streets alone because Big Brother is watching.
I think in New York they
Literally Big
stopped the
Brother.
crime like this with the cameras all around.
Among others, I know it from Singapore. Singapore is also organized as, it's not totally a smart city, but it's quite organized as a smart city, and it gives low crime rates. Because at the end of the day, a lot of crime is opportunity based. And so if people don't feel they have the opportunity, they don't commit crimes. Okay, when do you commit a crime? For instance, when do you steal? Stealing
When
is
no one's watching and no one will catch you.
exactly when no one's watching, no one will catch you. Okay, and then so if you know that you're being watched, you will steal less. You will, even if you lose something, it will not be taken by someone else, but it will be returned to you. So it has a lot of upsides, but I agree it also has downsides. So innovation seeking is really about that. It's about all those issues of smart cities, and by the way, because Israel is doing a lot of innovative work in smart cities, we have startups that are focusing on smart cities and smart living, and so that is another reason why we have the automotive industry seeking innovation in Israel, because autonomous driving also means that we need smart cities, or smart cities go hand in hand with autonomous driving. So we have all those processes that are taking place, and in Israel is really one of the hubs in the world to provide innovative thinking about that. So where to enter is really once about what do we really want, or what are we looking for, or what do we need for our value added chain, and once it's about the place, the physical place where we can find it. And then we have the second question, which is about when to enter.
You're basically doing their presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, let me move on.
I'm sorry.
I think they should just do their presentation.
I'm sorry. Can I
You
do?
can talk about Israel. Yes, you can do.
Can I do Subway?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Whatever you want. Feel free.
no, I don't want to take away their presentation.
There.
Okay, your presentation. Okay, Subway. What is Subway about?
Fast food.
Fast food.
everywhere.
Eat
Easy.
flesh.
Yes, it's about eating fresh, it's about fast food. But what kind of fast food is it? It's not hamburgers and it's sandwiches.
It's on the go food for people who are
Yes,
running, and
but
it's
it's-
only
it-
at localized places where there's a lot of
Inflation, it's not.
Right, where there is a lot of foot traffic.
zamila.
Foot traffic. Okay, so, but basically think about it. They sell sandwiches, so it's about fast food, but it's about sandwiches. Now, whoever has traveled, for instance, in Asian countries, how much sandwiches did you meet there? Asian countries? In Asian countries, how many sandwiches did you meet there?
They don't need no.
Not much.
They
Not much.
don't really eat sandwiches, right?
They have Asian food, yeah.
Yeah, because what do you eat in the morning in India or in China?
Rice.
Rice, you get a bowl of rice. Exactly.
But there is Subway.
And there is Subway. So that is an interesting,
Tourists are.
that's an interesting issue, right? So Subway started out as a local company selling sandwiches to the local market. And at a certain point, they started to internationalize. Now, what is nice about this story is that the internationalization process at first was not really planned, because that many times happened. We think about it when we teach models and so on, we many times come with a rational, analytical model. But if you look at the behavior of many companies, many times internationalization starts actually with an accident, or not exactly an accident, but a chance meeting.
By mistake.
Or by mistake, or someone talked to someone and said, I like your business concept, can I use it in another country? And then without much thinking, the company will say, okay, why not? And the nice thing about Subway is that nowadays it's really an international company, but it started out very much like that. So let's have a look. So I really like this example of Subway because, first of all, it started out per chance. They didn't do a big market research and then found which country is best for them to internationalize into. No, what happened, and as said, that happens many times with many companies. Someone told them, hey, I like your product. Do you mind if we become your franchisee outside the home country? And once they had a number of franchisees, they started really thinking about what works, what doesn't work, which countries are better for them to be in, and so on. So basically only the analytical process started at a second stage and not at the first stage. But now basically they use exactly those aspects that we're talking about here.
Hub Media.